So the $1,000,000 question is Hater a good book? Yes, it is. That said, I personally hated every second of it. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel and another episode of Rated R Thursday Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing the book Hater by David Moody. Hater is book one in a 3-book series, and author David Moody originally self-published this book in 2006. The book takes place presumably somewhere in the UK, though it is never specified, and it follows the main character Danny, who is a husband, father, and has a 9-to-5 job working for the government, which is referred to as a council. One day throughout the city, certain residents become suddenly homicidal and commit random and brutal acts of violence, most of the time killing their victims. Now the reader comes to understand rather quickly that these killers are acting out of a sense of fear or paranoia that comes to them instantly. Over the course of a week or two, these incidents that go from random occurrences here and there become so severe and so widespread that the general public, with the help of the news media, begins to learn that they are very much not safe. And it is at that point that this particular society is thrown into chaos and we get our post-apocalyptic storyline rolling. Hater does end in a cliffhanger, and it would be necessary to read on to book 2 in order to even get a little bit of resolution. There are a lot of questions remaining at the end of this particular book. Structurally, this book is written in first person, present tense, from the perspective or point of view of Danny, with the exception of a few standalone portions that the author chooses to write in third person, past tense. And it's those portions of the book that the reader is transported to the events and scenes of some of these acts of violence that our narrator Danny is not participating in and is not witness to. So I have about 4 criteria that I use to determine if a book is good. The first and only non-negotiable rule that I have is that the book has to make me feel something. Yes, I would like for the book to make me feel happy, but as long as I'm overcome with an emotion that is a direct result of the storyline, then it has fulfilled that criteria. The second is that the book needs to be unique in concept, or it has to have a very unique particular plot element driving the story forward. The third is that characters need to make sense. What I mean by that is what a character says, does, thinks, feels, and what motivates them needs to be cohesive. It needs to make sense amongst those other traits. And the fourth is the same as the third, except that instead of characters, the world has to make sense in the same sort of way. So basically the setting that the characters are in. Given those 4 criteria, Hater is a good book. I could not let my personal feelings about the book deter me from that belief. I would rate this book positively, even though I found it very difficult to read and didn't have a good time. I also found Hater a little bit difficult to read because of its brutality. And I'm not necessarily talking about gore, because I can read gore. And I'm not talking about the fact that there were homicidal maniacs, because I don't have a problem with homicidal maniacs in my fiction. But the brutality stemmed from the manner in which people were killed and the people doing the killing. So when we're transported into these scenes, which are actually visually separated from the rest of the book by italicized font, as soon as you get there, you're immediately filled with this sense of dread because you recognize with the first word that this is going to be someone's death. For instance, these killers, they could be a stranger on the street, but they could also be your coworker, your parent, your child, your spouse, your BFF in middle school. Like, there's no limit to who turns into a killer in this book, and it's shocking and unsettling. That's what it is. It's sort of unsettling. So that made it difficult for me to read, but it wasn't necessarily something that I hated about the book. Now, there are two very specific reasons that I hated reading this book. The first is that I didn't like any of the characters. None of them. I didn't like Danny. I didn't like his wife. I didn't like his boss. I didn't even like Danny's children. There was 0 recurring characters in this book that I could stand. I didn't care about them. Like, they drove me crazy. In fact, the characters in this book that I liked more than any others were the ones that were either turning into killers or becoming victims. And I didn't like Danny because he's pretty much the most miserable bastard I have ever read about in fiction. Like, this guy hates his job and hates his apartment and hates his lifestyle. And I'm pretty convinced that a lot of the time he hated his wife and children. If I had to read Danny telling his children to shut up one more time, I was going to lose my mind. The problem with that is the things that Danny hated were circumstances that he had created for himself. He's very good at playing a victim throughout the beginning of this book. Like, he doesn't like his job, but he can't get another one. And he doesn't like his apartment, but he can't live anywhere else because he can't afford to because his job is so terrible. He doesn't like that he can't go out and experience things and live life because he has to have children. Well, granted, we don't all purposefully have children at a specific time, but basically Danny's actions would convey that he was willing to take that risk. So I don't feel any sympathy for Danny. I feel like he's just too used to playing a victim. At the end of the day, he's still a doormat. He still does everything his boss says. He still does everything his wife says. He still holds his tongue around his father-in-law, who basically likes to push his buttons. I mean, it's ridiculous. I find Danny incredibly frustrating. Beyond absolutely despising Danny's character, he's got to be the most okay, let me put it this way. I have never witnessed one person brutally attack another. And I sincerely hope that that is not common in anyone's day-to-day life. Danny, in the course of a week, has pretty much witnessed 4 people die right in front of him because they've been murdered in some spontaneous and grisly manner. And Danny's dumbass is like, hmm, what a coincidence. Like, I believe it's his wife that keeps saying, what's going on? Something's going on here. What's happening to us? And Danny's just like, nothing. This is, yeah, the news is covering some violent occurrences, but that happens all the time. It's what's different is that they're finally covering it. Otherwise, it happens and we never know about it. Like, in a week, you've seen 4 murders. It's a crazy week this week. I mean, the second reason that I hated reading this book is because I can't stand the writing style Moody chose to use when writing from Danny's point of view. It's very choppy. It's short with simple sentence structure and just like reading a list. And I don't feel like there's enough variation in the language. It just annoyed me. It was very hard to want to read. Like, I couldn't stand the words the way that they were literally formed on the page. And I know that that is not Moody's writing style in general, because those portions of the book that I mentioned that are written in third person, past tense, were way better. Way just sentence structure, sentence variance, vocabulary, description, just way better than anything that Danny was saying or explaining. If I take a step back and I look at this book objectively, or as objectively as possible, as a writer myself, I really thought the entire time that I was reading it that I was being manipulated by David Moody. That he chose these despicable characters that I would hate. He wrote in this manner that made the book uncomfortable and set a pace that kept the reader off kilter and made it not flow well in order for the reader to stay uncomfortable, to not fall into a rhythm, to not ever let their guard down. Like, I feel like it was all a big plan by David Moody. And if that theory is true, then David Moody should pretty much write everything forever. Everything. Because if that is the case, I've never been so successfully manipulated by a book. Ever. I mean, I hated this experience more than I've loved reading any other experience. And I hope that that was David Moody's intention. I hope that, at least on some level, he used technique to evoke specific emotion in his readers. So the reason that this book is included in Rated R Thursdays should be pretty obvious, but in case it's not. So the violence, the imagery, when it comes to the killings, it's pretty intense. When you have a school-age child beating their mother to death with canned goods, you don't really want immature, underdeveloped minds exposed to that material, in my opinion. There are a few keys that will determine whether or not you like this first book. If you think you might be bothered with the idea of a small child committing murder, you might want to skip this book, I think. Yeah, for sure. If you are okay with that, you're not affected by it, and you're a horror fan, particularly apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic themed horror, then you're probably going to like this sucker. If you can read a book without becoming an emotional sponge, if you can read a book without taking on the emotions of the character or the circumstance, then you might be okay reading this book. Basically, if you're an empath, you're going to want to skip it. But I would think that fans of the genre would want to read this book simply for its accomplishments and its longevity and its style. It seems like one of those books in the horror genre that you'd want to mark off as having read. As a person who craves closure in almost every circumstance of life, including in books, I'm very, very tempted to read the second and third book of this series. That said, I am also pretty tempted to just get the fuck off this train, because it is a crazy, crazy train. So basically, I am looking for advice on whether or not I should read the second and third books of this series. So if you have, let me know what I'm in store for. So if you've already read Hater, or you have questions for me about whether or not you should read Hater, or you have read books 2 and 3, please leave those comments and thoughts in the section below. If you would like to purchase Hater, I have left a link down below for that, as well as the Goodreads link in case you want to do a little bit of your own research on the book. If you liked this video, please let me know by clicking that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Depending on the books that I finish, I post book reviews on Movie Mondays, Rated R Thursdays, Free Book Fridays, as well as monthly videos such as hauls or TBR lists. Thank you so much for watching and for reading, and I will see you guys very soon. Check.